We have such a cool community at Kingham, and the alumni community is more than just our former pupils. It includes former staff, and this week we've got a piece on David Shepherd, who was the warden in the 80s, but also taught English before that. He's got some great stories that he shared with Mark, so I hope you enjoy it as much as I did.
The curious thing was there were quite a few of the staff who, like me, had come from overseas. They'd worked overseas. Edward Batchelor, who was the housemaster of Durham, he'd been a headmaster of a school in Kenya, I think. Ralph Mann had worked in Kenya. Rodney Chapman, who was the Clyde housemaster and then took over as second master, he'd worked in Nigeria. So I think Teddy, who of course had had a long experience in Kenya, had a certain sort of inbuilt sympathy for people who'd worked overseas like that. But there were, I mean, obviously they were all characters, as most adults have distinctive characteristics. I'm thinking, for instance, about one speech day when the CCF had a glider, has a special kind of name, was launched with an elastic band, which is the most remarkable feat you can possibly imagine. And Jim Williams, who was running the CCF, then said, well, we're going to launch this glider. They launched it on the bottom games field there, and you pulled it back on the elastic band, and a lad sat in there, and then it took off into the air. And he, Jim, in one of his perhaps less receptive moments, allowed the son of one of the staff to go up in this thing too, you see, which made me, looking out of the head's office window, almost have a fit. John Essayne was a colourful man, and his wife Flora, a lovely, lovely lady, they ran Norwich, was even more colourful. They met here, and she, I think, was the school nurse, and he taught biology on the staff. And then they decided to get married, and the story was that he had a free period just before break, so they nipped off, got married, came back after break, carried on teaching, but with suddenly Mr. and Mrs. Essayne. But there's a wonderful story about her having gone to Cheltenham shopping, parked the car in a car park. When it's time to leave, she couldn't get the automatic barrier to open. So looked around, nobody else about, opened the boot of the car, got out a spanner, unfastened the barrier, leant it against the wall, and drove home. Colourful in that sort of way, you know. Who else? Well, of course, Bob Shepton, the chaplain, he was a remarkably colourful man.
If the Lord is with us, we can certainly go in and conquer.
Because, of course, he had been in the Marines and was a great outdoor pursuits fellow. Where do we start with him? And, of course, he had a yacht. So he took people sailing initially across the Channel to the Channel Islands. And then they went to the Azores, and then he came to sail across the Atlantic and follow the route of Eric the Red. Now this, of course, raised serious insurance issues, which I had to tackle, not least, of course, because there's the Rohilla experience. 1959 was it, when this yacht with 2 members of staff and 5, 6 boys on it was lost in the Channel. The governors, quite rightly, were concerned about, oh, the last thing we want is a repeat of this awful tragedy. So I had interesting discussions with the insurance company, and insurance agents being what they are. Their observation was, the important thing, warden as I was then, is that you be prudent. And I, being a cynic, said, yes, I know what prudence is. It's wisdom after the event, isn't it? If something goes wrong, you're going to clobber us. Anyway, the governors were tremendously brave, they really were, and said, yes, that's fine, we're happy for this to happen. So Bob had a tremendously exciting time and a very, very enthusiastic following among the boys. He, of course, built this assault course, which used to be behind, is it still Greenwich there? But has now been moved, I think, and they swung around on the assault course all the time, which was very exciting, and became very good. They took part in national CCF championships, and on one famous occasion beat Eton, which enabled me to say at speech day on that particular occasion, they even managed to beat a school which is so famous, it features in the Times crossword, you see. So everybody knew that. I think there are 3 characteristics of a schoolmaster mistress. You've got to be a good teacher, know your subject, have an enthusiasm for the subject, be able to get it across. You've got to have other interests, because you get youngsters coming in who are switched off from the world, And somehow you've got to find something which they are interested in. It can be anything respectable. As I talk, I think again about Bob Herringshaw, who taught CDT, but was an enthusiast for motor cars and associated vehicles. So he used to get from local farmers old, decrepit tractors, dismantle them completely with a group of boys. They're all in their overalls, and they pulled the whole thing to bits, spread it out all over the floor, cleaned all the parts, then put it back together again, got it to work. Now that kind of characteristic seems to me in a schoolmaster absolutely essential. How good Bob Shepton was, the Rev teaching RE in a classroom, I'm not 100% sure. But even the lads loved him because, of course, they did such exciting things with him. So that's the second characteristic. And the third one, you've got to be a kind of a complete human being. And you find yourself looking at certain teachers and thinking, well, that person has that characteristic. Does the strength of that characteristic outweigh the disadvantages of the other characteristic? And this business of assessing staff is something which is important. Again, within the context of a boarding school where the staff and the pupils are so mixed together. As far as the business of Bob Herringshaw's tractor, the chairman of the governors, David Hampton, was a very interesting man. And he had a lovely wife. And I can see her now. She saw this tractor. They got it out on speech day, all smartened up. And she said, oh, I want to ride that. So she hitched up her skirt, climbed out of the tractor and drove it down. Well, the boys thought this was the most wonderful thing you could possibly imagine. And good for her. And good for him, that he encouraged his wife into that kind of thing. And again, it seems to me such routine school teaching business. Got to be careful not to say school mastering, haven't I? School teaching business. Find something the kid can do and encourage him, her, to do it. And that spreads into all sorts of other things because he identifies himself in terms of, in your case, the football. In Paul, but no, I can't mention his name, the tennis or the acting or whatever it was. The great thing about producing plays is it's the most wonderful team activity. You know, it's a cooperative event. There are all sorts of different things going on. The actors and actresses get the fame and the glory, but the lights people and the set building people and the costume people and the backstage people and all these sort of things, it all comes together. And this again seems to me a most wonderful life skill exercise, working together for a corporate result. I mean, it's a bit pompous that, isn't it, my saying this, but it's it seems to me so self-evidently true. The fun thing with these plays, of course, is you look back at the castle list. By chance, I have in my pocket the programme for Lumpkin, but also the government inspector, you see. I mean, you look down the list of names, I suppose the most famous one is Andrew Adonis, Lord Adonis of Camden. And it's, I mean, this is a slight distraction, but it's an illustration of the nature of Kingham Hill, that Lord Adonis of Camden is called of Camden because he was in care under Camden Social Services. He spent almost the whole of his childhood up to the age of 11 in a care home. And this is not secret stuff, it features in the books he's written. And then, of course, came to us funded by Camden. So to see Andrew Adonis playing the part of, I think he's a maid in one of the plays I did, Miss Pumpkin or something, and now he's a very senior peer in the House of Lords, Andrew Adonis, who was incredibly clever. And we all knew he was clever. Clever academically, but really committed, but also had the perceptiveness to realise that he was in a boys' school, and boys' schools can tend to be a bit beefy, you know, the rugby, the cricket, the basketball and whatever. And he is, as anybody who sees him on television will know, he's a somewhat slight build. So he made himself into a very good cross-country runner, which I think is tribute to his... I mean, I think of Malcolm Brecht, Air Vice Marshal Malcolm Brecht, who lives just down the road from us now at home. And I was chatting with Malcolm a few weeks ago, and he said, yes, well, Andrew Adonis came to me one day and said, look, Malcolm, I want you to speak in the debating society, the Octagon Society, as we called it then. Is it still the Octagon Society? You don't know. But there was an octagonal-shaped table in the library, and they used to sit around that. So it's called the Octagon Society. And Andrew, according to Malcolm's account, said to him, yes, well, I want you to speak on, and whatever the topic was. And Malcolm said to him, but look, Andrew, I don't believe that. I believe the opposite point of view. All the more reason, said Andrew, to speak on it. But I glanced down the list here, you see. John Cavallo and George Bland, Paul Owens, who went to Keble, where I was. And, of course, my own daughter was in it, and the daughter of the then warden. So, yeah, it was one of the functions of the head of English at that time to produce plays. So we did The Government Inspector, I did The Happiest Days of Your Life. We made a musical out of She Stoops to Conquer, which Wadham Sutton, who was then the director of music, wrote the music, and he and I did the lyrics. What else did we do? I've jotted down on a piece. Oh, Juno and the Paycock we did, which is a very fine Irish play. And given the resurrection of violence in Ireland, I hope not, it has a certain topicality now, I suppose.